I feel like I've mentioned this in many of my videos already, but it's still genuinely wild to me how popular Guilty Gear is now. Cause I'm not sure if people who've recently gotten into the fighting game community realize that Guilty Gear was never really in the same discussion with games like Street Fighter and Tekken before Strive. But now, this niche and hardcore fighting game series has grown way past even the fighting game bubble, and can stand on its own as a popular multimedia franchise. But this newfound mainstream popularity with Strive didn't come without a few weird prior experiments into trying to garner new audiences. Cause Guilty Gear has put out a 4-player party fighter, twice, a super random 2D platformer, and even a third-person action MOBA. And I'm not kidding, this is real. And this is Guilty Gear 2 Overture. You see, in the mid-2000s, Guilty Gear's developer Arxis lost the rights to most of the Guilty Gear series after the Japanese pachinko giant Sammy, who had published the Guilty Gear X and XX series, merged with Sega, which left Arxis without their main franchise. While this legal nightmare did give them the opportunity to start fresh with some new fighting game IPs, Arxis did still want to explore the Guilty Gear world. And thankfully, I did say that they lost the rights to most of the Guilty Gear series, but not all of it, weirdly enough. Arxis was able to keep some of Guilty Gear's ideas, themes, and characters for themselves. And by characters, I only really mean Sol and Kai. But I guess if you could only have the rights to 2 characters from this series, these are the guys you would want. But obviously, if they wanted to continue the series, they need to think outside the box. Which honestly, the series was primed for. Cause unlike other arcade fighters, Guilty Gear had extensive lore that was being spoon-fed to fans by limited arcade endings and outside media like Japanese audio drama CDs, that really limited the scope of how this insane world could be portrayed. So this series that stars 2 super crazy fighting anime dudes could have easily been translated into a character action game or even an RPG. But Arxis decided to look at real-time strategy games and the blossoming MOBA genre instead. In a 2008 interview with Silicon Era, the creator of Guilty Gear, Daisuke Ishiwatari, said that other fighting game series inspired him to create Guilty Gear, to push the fighting game genre, but now he had aspirations to inspire others with his own genre-defining title, which he described as a battle strategy game that took what Warcraft and its mod Defense of the Ancients, better known as Dota, was doing, but with more emphasis on player combat. So he basically wanted to make a third-person MOBA fighter, all the way back in 2007, which is kinda crazy foresight, cause this was 2 years before League of Legends would absolutely catapult this genre into the biggest esport cash cow ever, and he was doing it on console, the 360 no less. With this dramatic shift, Arxis was ditching basically everything they were known for, including any kind of wild naming conventions, cause they straight up called this new entry Guilty Gear 2, which I feel like is a statement of its own, symbolizing that this was the next step for the series, and potentially Arxis too. But before I really explain what this game is about, I have to admit that I've never really played a MOBA. I'm a fighting game guy, and when I look at this, I just don't care. But funnily enough, Guilty Gear 2 Overture was the second Guilty Gear game I ever played, after the Wii version of Accent Core. I was a kid with good taste. But at the time, I just did not get what was going on in this game. It didn't help that the story mode was full of technobabble that I just didn't understand, and there was no way in hell I was going to convince any of my friends to play this game with me at the time. So, I just kinda walked away from it thinking that it must have sucked for all these years, and when I thought about trying it out again for this video, I was bracing myself for a clunky failed experiment. But, man, Overture kinda rules, for a lot of reasons. So again, let me reiterate that I'm not a MOBA guy at all, so this may seem very obvious to the genre. But the basic gameplay loop of Guilty Gear Overture is that you have player characters called Masters on a map, and each Master has a home base called a Master Ghost, and the goal is to destroy the other player's Master Ghost. You do this by creating an army of AI-controlled dudes called Servants, that come in all shapes and sizes to take down the Master Ghost shield. And the only way to create Servants is by taking over outposts on the map, called Ghosts, that generate a resource called mana, that you can spend on servants and items by opening up your organ menu. Come on, it's Guilty Gear, you know things are gonna have ridiculous names. But these items you can buy can be random abilities, or basic health potions, or even banana peels. So, you basically want to capture a bunch of areas on the map to make money and create armies you can command around strategically to destroy the opponent's base, all while the opponent is hitting you with gun flames and bandit revolvers. So while I see this and want to fall asleep, I got hyped finding out that Guilty Gear 2 has launchers, OTGs, air dashes, and supers. So while this ain't my genre, I can still wake up DP and even Roman cancel out of it for more damage, and then eat a burst. Yeah, a surprising amount of Guilty Gear's fighting game identity is still here, making this feel like a pseudo Guilty Gear 3D arena fighter at times. But while cool combos are definitely possible, and there's an added layer of having different attacks, whether or not you're locked onto an enemy, Overture isn't having you do FRCs or anything, so it's pretty easy to pick up. But of course, the real difficulty comes from all of the micromanaging. A regular match is having you multitask fighting mobs and running all over the map capturing ghosts for resources, while your opponent drops off Evangelion-esque angel dragons on your base to ruin your day. Add this with the fact that you can also play 2v2 matches or 4-player free-for-alls, and the amount of things on the map you have to keep track of gets pretty ridiculous. But maybe having to keep track of ridiculous options on the screen is still kinda on par for the series. But Overture does a good job at keeping you in the game, and the more I played it, the more I understood Daisuke's vision, and saw that he was actually onto something. The game may not exactly be polished and streamlined to today's standards, but it's not jank. And I'm not even saying jank is necessarily bad, but every button I pressed, every command I entered, and every interaction I had made sense. And going back to how I felt when I first played the game over 15 years ago, and reading the incredibly harsh reviews from the time, I can't help but to think we just genuinely didn't get it. Especially because so many reviews compare the game to something like Dynasty Warriors, which makes me feel like they weren't judging the game on its multiplayer, but rather its campaign, which is something I also want to talk about. Earlier I mentioned Guilty Gear's expansive lore, and Overture was the first game to really put that story in front of the player, and the lore drops in this game are genuinely really important for the franchise. This isn't some non-canon spin-off. The events of Overture lead directly to Exard. Like, this is the first appearance of Sin and a Valentine, the precursor to characters like Ram and Jacko. And this is the first time we really get to see Raven and that man, known as Asuka now. This game also introduced the Universal Will and the Backyard, but if that means nothing to you, that's also kind of the problem with Overture's story. This game just feeds and name drops information to you like everyone knows how this intricate world works, when I think most people don't even really know what a gear is. So even though what's going on is very important, it's gonna sound like gibberish to most people. Which part of me has to respect, because Arxis felt confident in this vision and didn't want to dumb it down for the non-fans. If you wanted to understand what the hell this game was about in 2007, you better have played every game, read every MOOC, and listened to every audio drama. Overture's campaign has 19 missions with fully voiced English and Japanese real-time cutscenes. And while most of this mode is a half-baked but necessary tutorial for the multiplayer, there are still some genuinely cool set pieces, like Kai having to defend his castle against invaders in the pouring rain, and I'm about to show a few seconds of the final boss, so if you care about that, skip here, and Soul having to run through a lake of blood to fight an ungodly being while being rained down by pillars of fire and lasers. Come on, you know this rules. But there is also a lot of goofy stuff, like an entire mission that's just a scavenger hunt, or a top-down boss battle that just does not work. And maybe it's just because I don't have MOBA brain, but this game can be kinda hard on the normal difficulty, I'm not gonna lie. But if this campaign was the only way you engaged with Overture, I wouldn't blame you for writing this game off. But now I realize that's like writing a fighting game off because the arcade mode sucked. The campaign does introduce us to our very small cast of characters though. We of course have Soul, who is sporting probably my favorite design of his. It feels like a nice blend of Holy Order and regular Soul. I love this outfit. He's a pretty easy character to play, because he hits extremely hard, and his army of ratty old machines are around to pick up the scraps until later in the match when he starts unlocking his big boy units. But I feel like Soul outshining his own army is kinda in character. And just in case you're worried, he still does have Dragon install. Kai on the other hand, feels like he's really trying to play a fighting game, cause he has great one-on-one pressure, but kinda loses to big groups unless he rips a super. The Illyrian Knight units he can summon are probably overall the best units in the game, but come at a steeper price than other armies. And these knights are the exact same units that Sin has access to. And man, I love Sin's design in this game too. I think he looks great, denim flag and all. And while he doesn't have his food mechanic yet, he still does have super long normals, his beak driver, and big boy damage. I like him a lot in this game. And now for the characters you probably don't know, because next we got Azuna, who probably has one of the worst designs in the entire series to be. I'm sorry. This weird dude comes from the backyard to explain a lot of the plot to Soul in the gang, in progressively annoying ways.
I cleaned up the mess.
Damn, that was like crazy. You're just what I thought.
He's also arguably the weakest character in the game, mostly because his traditionally Japanese themed servants are outclassed by all of the other armies. But he does have cool movement, flashy combos, and one of the funniest units in the game called the Dairobachi, because this massive thing ignores all mobs just to hit ghosts hard as hell, making for cheesy game finishers. I guess that's also in character for this dude. Then we got Dr. Paradigm, who is our last good guy on the team, who also happens to be a peaceful dragon gear type bird thing that commands an army of gears, which I just love. We should have more playable monsters in this series. Paradigm is a slow zoner that has strong AoE and mob clear, but loses one-on-ones. He can also rush you with super cheap units or drop monstrosities that seem to have infinite health on you. All in all, he's unique and a lot of fun when you're not being forced to run away. Then we have my boy Raven, who makes his first playable appearance here, but feels a lot different than the Raven we'd see in Exard, and not only his design, but gameplay and personality. Cause while he does have his needles that slow the opponent down, he doesn't have stretchy limbs, and his love for masochism is totally toned down here, cause this Raven seems a lot more serious and stern for the most part. But he's still got a little sauce in him, cause he hits poses after supers, and still thinks getting hit feels good. Overture gameplay wise though, he's pretty straightforward and can play a good hit and run game. His creepy Lolita-esque servants called the Viswell have a strong early game but fall off soon after. But I love these twisted designs. And the Viswell army is shared by the final character of the roster, Valentine, who is the first of many clones of Soul's dead wife. This guy just can't catch a break. And I'ma be real, I love this design. Even as a kid I knew this went so hard. And her theme Diva is probably one of the best songs in the entire franchise. Gameplay wise though, she's annoying as hell, cause she has super strong zoning and a double jump she can hit nasty combos with. Definitely a great juxtaposition in gameplay to Soul. And those are all the characters in Overture, besides Dizzy, who isn't playable and isn't even technically name dropped, cause in the story, she's been sealed in stone and is called the Maiden of the Grove. And if this was their way of skirting around the licensing issues, Arxis should have just put a mask onto Ino and called her the Songstress of Rock or something. But anyways, although the cast is super small, they're all pretty unique because of their movesets and the different items and servants they have access to. And a lot of the servants have interesting gimmicks themselves. You of course have your basic weak and strong servants, but there are servants for zoning, servants for buffs and debuffs, and servants that can create other servants from the corpses of your enemy servants, just to list a few. Which just drives home that there are a lot of ideas in Overture that honestly somehow shockingly come together pretty cohesively. Before we're playing the game for this video, I was a bit amused but not surprised at the fact that there was a small but loyal community for this game, which I mostly attributed to the fact that it's got Guilty Gear in the title. But after earnestly trying to understand this game, it now makes sense to me why the Discord for this game has players hosting matches daily. Cause Guilty Gear 2 Overture is a real game. It's not a meme or a goofy oddity to bring up as a fun fact. Daisuke was ahead of the curve with this game, and while I don't think the world was ready for a weird 360 exclusive Japanese MOBA in 2007, funnily enough, I think that Guilty Gear has become so popular that this would absolutely kill now. But I'm still happy to see that Overture hasn't been casted away embarrassingly by Arxis. Cause again, the story here is important, but also a lot of character ideas in this game did get translated into Exard, one of them literally being a Valentine with a damn MOBA mechanic. Thankfully Overture is accessible on Steam now, and regularly goes on sale for super cheap, so it's not too late to try it out. I did end up playing matches in the Overture Discord, and got absolutely bodied, but was pleasantly surprised at how good the connections and games felt too. Again, I really went into this video with the expectations that I'd just cover a weird little game that's memorable for being different, and mainly just talk about how wacky the story is, and that's it. But I'm leaving this having a ton of newfound respect for this game and community. I can't believe it, but Soulja Boy was the first to do it again. He knew that this game was peak all along. But now I feel kinda crazy thinking that Guilty Gear should definitely try this again, now that they have an audience that would actually appreciate something like this. So, the moral of the story here is, never be swayed from Daisuke's vision, I guess. Thanks.